Hello, fellow travelers. Under the watchful gaze of crows perched high above, we embark on a journey etched in shadow and ink, and guided only by the trembling needle of a compass that defies reason. Take a deep breath as we unravel the unknown.
Hello fellow travelers, my name's SG and welcome to the channel. Have you ever returned to your hometown and felt something was off? Maybe you were gone a day, maybe a week, a month, a year, maybe even a decade. Perhaps you look around and even though all looks the same, something's different somehow. But you start to realize it's not just the town or the people, it's you. You have changed, your memories are different. Whether it may be for better or for worse, it's different. But, just like you, something in this town sees the change in you and wants to bring you back to your factory setting, for lack of a better phrase. That's where we find our main characters, Alex and Jay, in this story. It's been more than a decade since they returned to Rosswood. Different people, but still very much the same. With the same old spirits still haunting this small town, but with a completely new energy. Leading to the question, is this a new story with an old setting, or an old story with a new direction? And now with all that being said, let's get started, shall we? But before that, please leave a like, comment, subscribe down below. This is a continuation of the original Marble Hornet storyline, or maybe you could say an alternate telling of it, but we'll get to that in a second. If you do like this content, you can go check out my other videos I've done on the original Marble Hornets. There is a total of 3 different videos. I'll leave the link to the playlist down below. You can also go check out the original if you want to. I'll leave a link to the original channel as well. But if you want a more in-depth look at it, with all the symbolisms mentioned and a deeper understanding of the story, go check out Nick Nocturne aka Nightmind's videos, which I will leave down below as one of the official look-ats for the Marble Hornet series. Thanks again for watching, and let's get started, shall we? Alex and Jay make their triumphant return as the main protagonists of the series. They are in this world as paranormal investigators. Much in the same vein as Twin Paranormal or Overnight, they go to haunted locations, stay the night, and upload their findings on YouTube. We don't really know much about their following or their channel altogether, but we do get the idea that they are still fairly new at this, saying that they've been to locations before, but have had little success and have even considered faking evidence in the past. And while we still don't really know why they went to Rosswood, the main reason they're given throughout the series is that they are trying to go to Rosswood Forest, or more specifically, Rosswood Hospital. There, they're planning to stay the night in the ruins of the hospital so that they can get some footage, along with maybe faking a ghostly encounter there. That being more Alex's idea overall. The main reason behind this, other than that, is that they've been there before in the past. They have been to Rosswood Hospital, or at least the ruins, for an independent film that Alex had done many years ago when they were just barely in college. This indie film, as many of the Marble Hornets fans may recognize, is called Marble Hornets, a small coming-of-age story about a young man going back to his hometown and realizing things are a little bit different than how he remembered. With Alex being the main writer and of course the main director, and Jay, even back then, being the cameraman. So all in all, they consider this the best location to start their up-and-coming YouTube channel, or at least their upcoming fame. And with the help of Jody, the local historian of Rosswood itself, and their own broken memory, they managed to find it fairly easy, going back to locations that even us as the fans were excited to see make a return. But it is at this point where the series starts making a dark turn. Because as Alex and Jay are recording B-roll footage of the scenery and the buildings itself, they start hearing somebody messing with their own equipment inside the buildings. And when they went to go check on their own cameras along with a lot of the equipment that they set up, they find that no one has messed with it so far. But when they do go back out to go finish filming, they realize that 5 o'clock has suddenly turned to nearly midnight. They don't really know how that happened, or where the sudden missing of time, or even just memory has come. All they know is that they are going to stay the night anyway, so they just work with what they got, that being a small handheld camera. Well, not small, enough for a pretty decent amount of footage to be filmed. With the sudden weird happenings sounding around them, we have Jay trying to call home, with the character we now know as Riley, his wife, but his signal isn't reaching through. almost as though this is an entirely dead area, which it really wasn't previously to this. And before we know it, hours do suddenly go by, almost within seconds if you will. But the sun has not risen. It has not passed noon, but the time says that it has. So when the dawn breaks, at least as according to their own phones, they begin making the trek back to their own car, maybe to get more cameras or more equipment, but Jay really just wants to go back home because this has become a weird occurrence. But as they walk, they find themselves constantly walking in a circle if you will, back to the original hospital if you can believe it. After an entire day of trying to walk back to their car, they give up and set up camp again in the hospital itself, finding passageways, finding holes in the walls, finding things that don't really belong or they don't remember, period. But it is after the first day that we start hearing something else in the hospital. We start hearing a creature. Something is walking through this place. And when we finally get a good look at it, it's a creature that we all know very well. The operator himself. Or the Slenderman if you will, for those non-Marble Hornets fans. Soon enough, 10 days pass in total. They have no food, no water, and they're slowly losing their minds at this point. That's when Alex decides that he wants to go look around himself to see if he can find something, but really he's just in a daze himself. Leaving Jay to go and search for Alex, but he himself is losing his mind too. We end it with Jay hearing a voice, aka Riley's voice, deep in the darkness of the hospital, and him going towards it, leaving the camera behind, and then the camera appearing in the real world on a sunny day in the middle of the grass. The camera is found by construction workers and was given to Jay's wife. We end these series of videos with a message from Jay's wife herself, saying wherever he is, she wants him to come home. If there's any information or anything that can connect her to where Jay may or may not be, please contact her as soon as possible. We then cut to black, and that is the end of Marble Hornets Rosswood. Now that was just me giving a brief rundown of the overall series. If you do want to check it out, like I said before, I'll leave a link down below to the original channel, so go form your own opinions about it. I do suggest it. It does require a bit of knowledge about the original Marble Hornets itself, but it is definitely worth it. So go check it out, let me know what you think, and let's move on, shall we? While there is a lot to be said about the characters in this series, we're just going to focus on Alex and Jay, and I don't really want to talk too much about what the implications behind them are, because I want to say that for a little bit later. So for right now, let's just talk about who they are as people, and ultimately what led to all this. First of all, let's start with our first main protagonist, Alex. Alex himself is a self-proclaimed filmmaker. He makes documentaries and short films. But he has not really had success just yet. In fact, you can call him headstrong, you can call him determined, but you can also call him very desperate in trying to find something successful. We do know that he works at a call center in his everyday life, and it's not really fulfilling to him. He's very much jealous of Jay himself. Now, Jay is a renowned, or at least a well-known, filmmaker, or cameraman if you will, and editor. He's worked on projects before, big ones as Alex has said. He's mainly doing this YouTube channel to help Alex, mainly because they've been best friends forever, and he really does want to see him become a success as well. Of the two, we do know that Jay himself is the one that has it the most together. He has a wife, he has a home, and he has a high-paying job. Where Alex has said before that he just has a small apartment that's very cheap, and works at a call center. Not a bad living, but he does want more. And we do see that dynamic become more and more relevant throughout the rest of the story. Now with all that being said, the narrators themselves are Alex and Jay. They're the ones behind the cameras and giving their own 2 cents. So we don't really need to go into all that, but let's get into the bigger mystery, shall we? Now I know what you're all thinking, mainly because all those Marble Hornet fans are expecting this to be purgatory. Or at least an area that is between life and death, mainly because the only ones we see are Alex and Jay. When in the original there was Brian, Tim, Jessica, and even Amy in the original first season. And for most people that this is enough to clarify the purgatory thing is because they were the only 2 taken away by the operator, aka Slenderman. And it has been suggested by the creators that they were taken to be tormented again and again throughout the rest of their time. But that theory, while good and does make sense, doesn't fit in the overall storyline. It doesn't fit what we know of Rosswood itself. And I definitely don't want to think it's an alternate timeline where they just never experienced the operator to begin with. No, I think this is something deeper than that. Mainly because if this were a purgatory, they would be seeing characters or people they knew before they were abducted by the operator. Hence, they would either be a lot younger in this scenario, or they would be constantly seeing Tim and Brian, Jessica, and of course Amy. But we're not introduced to any of them just yet. Instead, we're introduced to Jodie. Jodie herself is an interesting character, mainly because we've not seen her previously in the original run. But we have seen a relative. For all those who watched the original Marble Hornet series, we do know that there was at least one survivor, that being Jessica. Jessica did survive past the operators, at least as far as we know, clutches, including being part of her own comic series where it's still pretty much the same. She managed to escape from the operator, aka Slenderman. But the one thing that we do have to take note is that Jessica's last name was Locke. And Jodie in this series is known as Jodie Locke as well, suggesting that they may be related, maybe sisters, maybe cousins, and it doesn't help that they kind of come from the same area, aka Rosswood. So much so that Jodie seems to be a historian there and has set her own home there. Because as she said, she's only about an hour away from where they're filming the original hospital. And while this connection can be tossed as just being an Easter egg or just a loose connection for something later on, I do think that it's going to have a bigger impact. Mainly due to the fact that she is investigating the Rosswood Hospital, along with all the darker aspects of it, the forest itself, and she seems very protective and very nervous to go there. Because when Alex and Jay invited her to join their investigation, she was full-heartedly saying no, she did not want to be part of it, and gave the excuse that it was public property and that they would be penalized if they even tried staying there just for 10 minutes. But even that reaction, the way she just feared and even just ran away from it, does kind of indicate something bigger happening there. And if we want to make an even bigger connection to the idea that she is Jessica's sister, listen to the story the man or the drunk man gives them when he's talking about that area. It does sound very familiar to the original series, but he talks about when him and his brother were out with these two girls. These two girls claimed that something came out of nowhere and took him away, but people don't seem to remember him anymore. He's just disappeared off the face of the earth, and he is now the only one that can remember him. Now, this is an interesting fact because Jodie is listening to it and nodding as if she thinks he's crazy. But if we really give it some thought, we can say that maybe that this is the exact same thing that happened to Jodie. That she and her sister were very close, and then one day she just disappeared. Maybe because of the events of the original Marble Hornet series. Because, as we know, Jessica is one of the only ones to survive, or at least wasn't imprisoned as well. We don't really know much about her ultimate fate, if you will, but we can take some guesses that something bigger did happen. But I must say, Jodie's appearance really does add a little more fuel to the fire for my theory, and that being that she mentions a very big urban legend from the original series that we know is a fact. Now, because of Jodie, we can admit, or can confirm at least, Tim is in this world. Tim himself, also known as Masky to most of the fans, is the one that has escaped from the hospital originally and may have caused fire to it, supposedly running from the operator himself. But that leads an interesting question as well. How much more of the history is the same? Mainly because, like I said before, Alex and Jay don't really bring up any of the other actors that were in the original Marble Hornets film. They don't bring up Ryan, they don't bring up Amy. Amy could be because Alex may have broke up with her, or more likely she broke up with him later on down the line. And I'm not counting Jessica either, mainly because she was not really part of the group until Jay met her like around season 2, so she's not really in the whole argument either. But the fact that Brian and Tim, who are big characters in the original series, aren't really mentioned or even nodded at is definitely a bad, or should I say, a peculiar non-inclusion. So that led me to think, are they still part of this world? Did certain elements in this universe still happen? Is this really the alternate reality that people are trying to say it is? And when Jodie said that told me, yes, Tim still exists. He still set fire to that building, and we can see that being evidenced there. We do know that they still went into this abandoned building at one point, and even are leaving small film reels like we see in the original run, because Jay picks one up and says, I think this is ours, and they don't usually point things out unless it's going to be significant to the overall story. It's just that cameras have become so advanced now that they don't use the same type anymore, as they did back then to film. And Jay even thought it was weird that they would do that, mainly because they don't really have the money to get film like that. So the idea of them hiding film reels, or at least film around the location, is already significant, mainly to the main story. So right there we have two instances of this happening. We do have one where Jay found the footage, and of course where Tim does in fact still exist. But there was one thing that they did take note of, I think in episode 2, where Alex says there was a graffiti mark that matched his names, A and K. Now him and Jay both admit that they don't remember making that, but Alex says he feels that he did at one point, maybe when they were leaving, but the initials right there, right where they would have been, is definitely something that is of interest, and is a good segue into this next element. Now, memory loss is not something that is different for the Marble Hornets universe. In fact, a lot of it does rely on the element of memory loss. If we go back to the original series, we do know that Jay has moments where he suddenly blacks out, where there's moments where even Alex blacks out. And that's even the whole point for both Maskey and Hoodie, that they are not really in their same mindsets. Of course, you could also argue that they're just seeking revenge against Alex for bringing the operator to them, but that's neither here nor there. We're mainly focusing on Alex and Jay in this scenario. So, the idea that they are losing memory isn't really that unique or different for the main series as a whole. In fact, I would have to say that we can see this as soon as episode 2, that being when they first experience night going from day to day. I do think that they're not stuck in a time loop. I think they're just blacking out and going back to the hospital. That they are blacking out during the day and just clearly waking up at night. Now there is some speculation, mainly because Jay takes note of the time every so often, saying that it is PM instead of AM. But how would he really be able to recognize that? Mainly because if he thinks he's awake this whole time, he wouldn't be able to notice if it were day or night. He could wake up at 2 a.m. and think it's still 2 p.m. And he's not even looking fully at his phone, aka the clock on his phone. He's just looking at the screen, mainly because he wants to keep track of time and not really let his phone die just in case he does catch signal. So the time loop can be explained that this is merely just a time lapse happening between them rather than they're stuck in a perpetual cycle. We do sort of see that being the case when we do see what Alex and Jay do when they're by themselves. Because as I said before, when Jay's looking at the time and when his phone dies, he can't really tell what time of day it is. Hence, because he's still in this idea that he's in a cycle rather than he's just blacking out. You do see the same thing happening in the original series, where Jay would be driving in his car, black out, and then realize that he's in a whole different part of the town, and that almost an entire week has passed without him even knowing. But to him, it's been just a couple minutes and it's still midday. But keeping that track of mind, I do have one curious question, or one curiosity if you will. Why Jay? Why is Jay here? Why is he the one having to go through this? I mean, yeah, he was the main protagonist in the original Marble Hornets series along with Alex, but he wasn't as dead set or as connected to the operator as Alex was, or even as, Maskey and Hoodie. But I think now we have an idea of why, and that really does go back to the original idea of Jay's character. And with that being said, let's move on, shall we? Now, the reason I want to talk about Jay is because, again, as I said, he's one of the main protagonists of the series, but it feels like this is a bigger storyline than we actually think. Because if we look back at entry number 19 of the original Marble Hornet series, or to be more specific, the video return from To The Ark's original channel, when we go to the video that coincides with it, if you will, aka return, like I said, with number 19 and 19.5, we do know that the description for that one says 91. Now, many have thought that this was a code, or maybe some way that this was to interpret something, or maybe that it was meant to be the reverse of what's happening for the original Marble Hornet storyline, aka why it's connected to it. And yes, I do think that at the time was the main point, but now that this is the future, if you will, now that we've gone long since past that, If we look which number is 91 of the Marble Hornet storyline, aka through the video list, we know that entry number 5 or number 4 of Rosswood is the 91st video of the Marble Hornet series. So whether it be a hunch or whether just pure curiosity to see if this had some sort of connection, it did, surprisingly enough. And this is just me either grasping at straws and trying to make something canon that isn't canon, but once it's broken down, it does kind of make sense. If we go to the arc video, the return that is, like I said, it shows Jay cowering in the middle of a hallway, in a corner if you will, and it shows the operator just simply passing by, as if noticing him and having Jay stark in fear. Of course, Jay doesn't remember this in his original video, and this was meant just to mess with him overall. But then we are accompanied by the words, "I found you," in that same video. And what we have in entry number 4 of the Rosswood videos, we have both Alex and both Jay going through hallways and suddenly being stopped by the Slenderman using the phone signals to distract them. A similar mirroring kind of event. Alright, we have a brief connection there, but it doesn't end with just that. Because like I said, it was meant for videos 19 and 19.5 and had a description of 91. So with that being said, we had to go back and look at entry number 19. And wouldn't you know that we have that video being where Jay's going to bed and is having a startling recollection after watching the video the next day of a masked person staring at him while he sleeps, who later on go on to be known as Masky. Now, this seems like a random connection, yes? That this is just two videos that don't really add together, and from two different timelines, if you will. But, what if I were to say that this isn't a different timeline, this is the same one, just years later? And that all this is accumulating for Jay to go to his rightful place amongst To The Ark's group. Or should I say, make it to where Slenderman is going to break his mind to make him what he was always meant to be, and that would be Scully. Now, even the most dedicated fans of the Marble Hornet series would probably be asking me, who the hell is Scully? Now, is that so much of a debate? Mainly because if we look at it, we have Hoodie, Masky, and the third one that was meant to be Jay, which was meant to come at the end of Season 1, but was later changed because they ended up scrapping it, and was even brought up several times into the Ark's video. Jay was meant to become a character who wore a skull mask, aka Scully. Creators did confirm that this was a main story and was even worked into a main plot in the overall arc of Season 1 leading into 2, where To The Ark keeps mentioning Jay being the one that lost his way, or the one that disappointed them, and the one that is lost and cannot be found no longer. Now, the biggest question for the original Marble Hornet storyline was, why is it so important for Jay to be Scully? Well, it wasn't that big of a storyline, but it was definitely a hole in the main theme of it all, if you will. And to be honest with what we're given now, it does kind of make the best sense, and to kind of answer it, we do need to look at Alex, especially towards the end of his arc in Rosswood as well. Now, as I said before, Alex is strong-headed, he is very determined, but also very cowardly and very nervous. He is the exact same character he was in the original Marble Hornet storyline. There is no different kind of take on him. Even the idea of him looking for the operator at the very beginning of it matches what he did at the beginning. Because remember, if we look at how the other members of the cast talked about him, was saying he was grabbing cameras and going to look for something out in the middle of nowhere sometimes, or even just filming himself trying to capture something. So his character arc is pretty much the same. And if you want to go with that, Jay's character arc is pretty much the same as well, where he is the unknown or unknowingly feeble victim in the storyline that is just following Alex and is constantly trying to follow him. And even if we go back to entry number 5 of Rosswood, that does seem to be the main idea behind it all. So there we are with the tropes being constants throughout this. But we can take it a step further, because a theme that was introduced in Season 1 of Marble Hornets was reintroduced in this. Briefly, but it was introduced. And that is Stigmata. For some of you who don't remember, there was a video in the original Season 1 where Alex was hurt, and that there was a bloody mark around his head, similar to that of the crucifixion when they put a crown around Jesus' head. Now this was confirmed to be the exact reference and to be Stigmata. And with what we got so far, I think we actually do have an answer for that. And not only that, how it relates back to the Ark. Now, To the Ark was the secondary channel for the Marble Hornets series. It was, of course, both a mix of various different people or characters that were brought in throughout the series. That being, Brian was confirmed, Tim was confirmed, and there was a third person that people have gone back and forth. Some said it was Seth, some said Amy when the first season did come out, or some even said Alex was making his own to just get his own Edgeworth in there. But for right now, we do know that the main two were in fact Brian, aka Hoodie, and Tim, aka Masky, and a third person. Now the whole point of this account was mainly to mess with Jay, to constantly lead him around or just to follow him to make sure he was on the right path. But when it was shown that he was on the wrong one, aka when he didn't become one of them, aka Scully, it did seem that they kind of turned their backs on him, and just dedicated more of this just leaving cryptic clues for the audience to figure out. Now I know what you're wondering, why bring up To the Ark if they never made videos again? They never came back, especially for this series, which a lot of fans did find pretty interesting. But some could skirt that away, saying that maybe it's because the events are different. Hoodie and Masky don't exist because Brian and Tim never became them. But as we know, that's not true, mainly because we know that Tim went through the same events again. And while not confirmed, nor is it really a theory of mine, I would take a wild guess that the man we saw drunk at the very beginning of episode 2, or 1 was it, the talking to Jody along with Alex, that he talked about a missing brother, I have to say that might have been Brian. But that's only assuming that they stayed there and that would be later confirmed. I do remember Brian said that he had a family that lived there and maybe even a brother and sister, so that is a odd connection to throw in there as well. So we might know for a fact Tim and Brian are already captured by the operator, and he's just looking for the third one meant to be Scully, aka it's meant to be Jay, hence why it came so hard at him in this very brief series. But why is the question? Why would he need Jay still? He could have easily just gone after Alec, which was the main point of the original Marble Hornets series, and Jay was just along for the ride, as far as we knew. But it seems now the operator is trying to fulfill a goal. He's trying to tie up loose ends at this point. And remember why they chose the name To the Ark. The Ark was a reference to Noah's Ark, or a means of safety amongst themselves and looking for something better away from the operator. Now that's been what the main fans have been thinking, and it's a loose summation of what the storyline does kind of suggest. But what happens if they never met? What happens if something's different? Suddenly Tim's gone, suddenly Brian's gone. But I know what you're thinking again. You think I'm contradicting myself by saying that's just confirming that this is a different timeline where the three never got together, or they never made To the Ark. And no, that's not what I'm saying either. Because if we think again about what To the Ark could mean, To the Ark could just mean they're gathering the important necessities, the important people. Just as Noah gathered all two of every animal to the Ark, the Slenderman's doing the same thing, just not for right reasons. AKA, he's trying to get Masky, Hoodie, and now Scully to himself for a reason that has yet to be confirmed, and maybe even more than that thanks to the appearance of Jessica and of course Amy, who does disappear into the storyline. So this line of thought does work if we're thinking To the Ark isn't about going to safety, much more collecting what's necessary, aka to the Ark. But what's this all leading to? What's this all going to, and how is this going to end? Well, that all depends on Alex, really. The operator himself does not have a story. The operator himself does not have a name. Except the operator, of course. But the operator has been occurring since the dawn of time, or at least since the 1800s. He's become an entity that has existed and has moved on from place to place. Just his own presence does inspire fear and can cause mass hallucinations, ill sicknesses, and of course, lapse in memory. On the whole, he does seem just like a figure that stuck around a Rosswood thanks to Tim's interference. But he did seem to attach himself to Alex right away. He did seem to make himself a presence well known. But now we know, and what we've learned from him in the past, he strikes when you're not expecting, and it will be brutal. In fact, he can erase memory altogether. He's erased people from existence even from the very beginning. So why toy with Alex? And we do know he's toying with Alex specifically, mainly because he could have gotten him at any time, he abandoned his friends, and even took his girlfriend of the time in the original Marble Hornet series. He was deliberately picking on Alex for a reason. And that really does go back to Stigmata. Now, Stigmata usually represents feeling the pain of Christ himself, aka wounds in the hand, or wrist, or even the crown of thorns. How does that relate back to Alex and the operator himself? Now, this is just my theory, but it does seem to line up with what we know. The operator is making Alex go through all this because it's something he went through as well. He's making Alex experience the pain he's felt. And that purpose is because he wants to turn Alex into the next operator. Now, I know that sounds far-fetched, but if we look at everything that's happened, it makes the most sense. Because all this is signs of a possession, if you will. Because if we look at it as a whole, they do represent the 4 elements or the 4 stages of a legitimate possession. One being infestation, that being the classic haunted house syndrome, loud noises, objects moving, or animals acting weird. And we do see that constantly with the dog suddenly barking or objects suddenly being gone. Oppression, which goes back to more of a physical attacks, aka finding wounds on your head, sleep disturbances, not being able to sleep right, having nightmares, and severe illnesses. We've seen that before as well. Obsession, Alex hits that right out of the park, mainly because he was constantly looking for the operator, finding ways to stop him, or just trying to find ways to avoid him. So that does kind of also make into the elements as well. With the last one being full-on possession, that means that you are no longer in control of your own body, you are not in control of your own mind. Instead, it is this creature's own wants and needs that you are merely precipitating in this scenario. Now, while this may not be the classic example of a demonic possession, I do think that this is the operator just preparing Alex for initiation into becoming not one of to the arcs, but to become the next operator. And that would have to be the overall idea, I would think. But I don't feel that the ritual ended at the very end of Rosswood. It does seem that there is something bigger going on. Well, not bigger, but that they're looking for something else. And to be completely honest, the bait's already been set. It even said so in the last video. Now, the fate of Jessica is definitely a questionable one, mainly because it is a canon event that she managed to break away from the main cast, aka from Brian, Tim, Jay, and Alex. And she managed to get away, being the only one that got away scot-free, because we do think that Tim ultimately got arrested by the police for the actions of Alex and the operator. But we did have a comic series come out shortly after. Now, this consists of Jessica being still on the run from everything, but kind of forgot everything as well. She put everything behind her, and the medication that she has put the memories of the operator and Alex to rest. That is until they start haunting her again, and this time they are more aggressive. We do have Alex coming back for the operator this time, and of course the operator himself continues to haunt her as well. We don't really know the end of her storyline, mainly because she just disappears and is constantly on the run. So I think that with this, and that the idea that she really didn't know Jay passed at that moment with Alex, and that she is assuming that maybe he got away. So with this footage coming out from their failed YouTube channel, or from their failed encounter with the operator, maybe she sees Jay, maybe she sees Alex and thinks, why are they together? What's happening? And why do they look so much older than when I see them usually? So, with that being said, she sees it go on TV, national TV, because we do know Riley, aka Jay's wife, did allow them to put it on YouTube and of course on television to kind of get more information on where Jay could be, or there might be people who have information about his sudden disappearance. So it wouldn't be out of this world to think that maybe Jessica sees it and gets help from Jody, aka who we presume is her sister, to help look for whoever or whatever took them, because we do know that they might still be alive somewhere, when they should not be, as a matter of fact. So all this could just be bait to catch Jessica, the last member in this whole group of people who have seen who the operator is and know what he's about. And as far as we know, she is in fact, and has been for at least a good 10 to 15 years, the last piece of the puzzle in this whole thing. So, if I'm using all the evidence I've gathered, and my own theories in this whole matter, the story should go as this. Rosswood is not an alternate universe, it's not purgatory, it's the same story, just told in a different time. This is Marble Hornets 15 to 20 years later. My guess is when Jay and Alex were originally taken out in the original ending to Marble Hornets, and taken by the operator, he didn't take them to be punished, he took them to be healed, and to be your mind erased and released back into the populace, if you will. They are then given fake memories of finishing the Marble Hornets original short, but ultimately not liking it and destroying it. We do know that being the fact mainly because Alex said he hated it when originally he said he loved it, and not even remembering what he did with the footage at the end of the day. Hence why this could also be why Tim was released from prison. Because they found Jay and they found Alex and they were okay, there was no harm to them. In fact, they didn't even remember who Tim was, period. We do know Alex survived mainly because of the comic books. It said that Jessica was constantly being attacked by the operator, and of course different appearances of Alex happening in the real world scenarios. Now it could be a ghost, it could be a specter, it could be your own mind just playing tricks on her. But we will have to take that on face value as well. And after their brief survival of this Rosswood incident, both Tim and Jessica were constantly hunted down by the operator. But as for Jay and Alex, they felt an instinct that they needed to separate, and they needed to go their own separate ways and do their own lives. Maybe it's because of the events they've suffered, or maybe it's because they simply just grown out of it. They both felt that need to go off and be their own things. But then one day Alex calls Jay, one day out of the blue. Maybe he saw how much of a success he was in his own field, or maybe he just felt like one thing or another, they could do something again together. Hence, they then started talking and started doing this YouTube channel, but curiously, about finding paranormal activity. So there was something in their minds already kind of pointing to that direction, them wanting to find ghosts or something strange and unique. And one day, Alex gets a message. He sees that his channel isn't doing so well, and thinks that he needs to do something more to get the views and subscribers he needs to become the next big thing, such as Ghost Adventures or Overnight, or even Twin Paranormal or the Paranormal Files themselves. And he thinks this message that he just got would be the key to doing just that. And it unlocked a memory, if you will, a memory from back when he was a kid about that location that was so creepy, so different, yet so familiar to him at the same time. That being Rosswood Hospital to be more precise. As of right now, we don't really know why he chose that location, but I have to assume that it's mainly because somebody contacted him about it, because he wouldn't arbitrarily just choose it out of nowhere. Now at this point in their lives, they have pretty much abandoned the idea of the operator. The operator has not come into their lives at all since then, and that's the bigger question, why? So when they go there after interviewing some people the day before along with Jody, Jay gets a weird vibe about the place, almost a familiar vibe, saying that he doesn't like it, he'd rather leave, when he's already done this so many times with Alex in the past. Alex himself seems to have a personality change, a personality that represents more of Alex at the very end of the Marble Hornet storyline, almost as if it were continuing as it went off, if you will. Because as we know from the original series, Alex wasn't as rough as he was at the end, he just got that way because of the influence of the operator. But once they stepped on the grounds of the hospital, that's when they were fully in the den of the operator himself, and his full wrath and fury was then put upon them. Now that in itself is also different, because in the original series, the operator was never this intense. He was never this strict. So that means whatever they were set up for, they were finally ready for it. But the final steps of it all was to break their minds ultimately, give them isolations, keep them there for a total of a month almost, and see what happens, because we do know Alex was the last one to scream out for Jay. And now with both gone from the face of the earth, the only thing that was left was their camera. and the camera left behind had footage of the operator, of Alex, and of Jay surviving this instance. And those who knew what was happening would be called to that area to figure out what was happening. And the only ones that would be able to know what was happening and would know where to look would be Tim and Jessica herself. The appearance of the camera itself being in the real world suggests that this is not purgatory and this is not any other dimension. This is just showing that this is happening and it's happening again. But overall, that would have to be my main theory about what the main story has been up to this point. But now, let's talk about what's in store for the later, shall we? Now, the next set of videos, which I would have to guess, is going to be a return of To The Ark's YouTube channel. Now, this would consist of a callback, or calling somebody home, if you will. Then they're calling back two certain peoples in a cryptic and eerie way, with the introduction of a new character amongst their people. And you already know who I think that might be. The one setting this all up has to be Jay himself, aka Scully, finally broken down by the operator like he was supposed to in the original series, and now is hunting the remaining members of the Marble Hornets cast. I think we'll see an artistic version of A Welcome Home, starring Jay and filmed by Alex, as we've seen in the past. But I think we will see found footage from Riley, aka Jay's wife, showing that somebody's showing up at their door wearing Jay's clothes, but they look tattered and dirty, and wearing a skull mask. Then we'll change perspectives and go to Jody. Jody's the only one that they actually know is in town and would have connection to all these characters. So it would go to her as being haunted and hunted by these strange figures, calling for Jessica and Tim to come back in an effort to fight back against these creatures. With Alex escaping, I use in quotation marks, as he did in the original series, trying to say that he's the one fighting against the operator, but again, unbeknownst to him, he's just getting them all together one more time for one more set of events. And with what we're given, we might get the full story of who the operator is, why is he doing this, and what does it mean to gather all these people. And while I don't know most of the answers, I do think that we will get more as it builds on moving forward. That's if it moves forward, because I do think that this is a good start and stop off point at the same time. Like if you left it here, I think it'd be interesting, but you do leave a lot of questions wandering around. Questions like, is this the first time that they've made a resurgence, aka Alex and Jay? If so, then what was on that tape that they found originally when they were filming the scenery? Is there a bigger story that we know going on here? And did Jay originally film something more that they need to see now that they know that there is something there? Did that passageway that Alex and Jay kept trying to go through really lead to an exit, or did it lead to somewhere else? Or was that old man with the shotgun that Alex and claimed to see trying to ward them off, was that an old man Alex going back in time? Time travel hasn't been introduced into this, but it's such an odd concept to bring up, and to mention when the only character we see with the shotgun being Alex in the original run, aka in entry 17 when he talks to Jay. Still, like I said, so many questions, but I do think that we have at least the building blocks to see what happens next. Alright guys, I know this has been a longer video than I have done in the past as of recent, but I did like this series. I did think it was fun, and definitely made me think more about what's happening in the overall character arcs in the storyline, and to see what happens later on. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe down below. Please check out my original review of the original Marble Hornets. Like I said, I'll leave links to all these things down below. Please go check them out. And I can't wait to see you guys next time. Have a great one, and see you later.